Hello, and welcome to the third season of Toward a More Just Future, a podcast from Rutgers School of Social Work. My name is Thomas Benjamin, and I'm a research project assistant at the Center for Research on Ending Violence at Rutgers School of Social Work. I am also a member of the school's Inclusion, Intersectionality, Diversity, Equity, and Advancement Committee, also known as the IIDEA Committee. This season, I'm speaking with some of my fellow IIDEA Committee members about critical topics related to inclusion, intersectionality, diversity, equity, and advancement. Today, I'll be speaking with DuWayne Battle, teaching professor, director of the Baccalaureate program at Rutgers School of Social Work on the Camden and New Brunswick campuses, and newly appointed assistant dean of bachelors programs. Under his leadership as director, the BA in Social Work program at Rutgers School of Social Work was ranked by College Factual as highly as second in the nation. Dr. Battle's teaching focuses on anti-racism, diversity and oppression, social justice, child welfare, and spirituality in social work. He created the Confronting Anti-Black Racism course and leads the Diversity and Oppression and Introduction to Social Work and Social Justice courses. As a researcher, he has developed and published a scale on measuring student learning about diversity and oppression. He has also published in the Journal of Teaching and Social Work on challenging anti-Black racism in social work curriculum. Dr. Battle has served as the Camden campus coordinator at Rutgers School of Social Work and is the campus coordinator of the Baccalaureate Child Welfare Education Program, a consortium of 7 undergraduate social work programs in New Jersey that partner with the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. He has also served as president of several educational social work organizations, such as the Association of Baccalaureate Social Work Program Directors, the Southwestern Social Work Association, and the New Jersey Baccalaureate Social Work Education Association. He was the first Black president of the New Jersey chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. Additionally, he serves on the Atlantic Cape Community College Human Services Advisory Board and People Acting to Help at 1919 Community Hub Board, a Philadelphia human services provider. Further supporting students, Dr. Battle founded 2 scholarships at Rutgers: the Phi Alpha Honor Society Scholarship Fund for BA in Social Work and MSW students, and the Crystal Skinner Memorial Scholarship Fund. To date, he has raised more than $180,000 for these funds. He is also a recipient of the Clement A. Price Human Dignity Award, one that honors extraordinary achievement and commitment to the promotion and practice of diversity, inclusion, and equity within Rutgers University. Before starting his career in social work, Dr. Battle served as senior pastor in both North Carolina and New Jersey and has a distinguished educational background in ministry, divinity, and religion, holding a doctoral degree in the field in addition to social work. DuWayne, thank you so much for joining us today. It's certainly a pleasure. Could you share a little bit about your background?
Sure, great. Before I do that, I want to thank you, Thomas, for all the good work that you're doing and for allowing me to be a part of this podcast series. I'm really excited. I also want to thank Laurie Zazinski, Katie Butner, those who are working behind the scenes, and of course, Associate Dean Antoinette Farmer and the members of our IIDEA committee, particularly the staff, the students, and the faculty. So I'm a part of the IIDEA committee, and so I really take great pride in being a part of this effort. So in terms of my background, let's see, what would I say? There's a lot to say, so I'll just kind of narrow it in. I was asked earlier this morning by someone, where are you from? And I had to say to them, I'm from the U.S. USA. Grew up in Washington, D.C., lived in Maryland and North Carolina before making my home in New Jersey. And during that time, I was in training early on in life. Fourth grader, I knew what I wanted to be in life. Teacher said, "What do you want to be?" to the whole class. And I said, "I want to be a dentist." And I was in a pre-dental program and had a transition from dentistry to ministry, and I matriculated at HBCU, Howard University, grade school, and was later moved on and became a religion and philosophy major with a history minor. From there into theological studies, earning a Master of Divinity and a Doctor of Ministry, both of those degrees, and started in congregational work. And that's something, Thomas, a lot of people don't know about my journey, but I started there serving churches in North Carolina, later in New Jersey and New York. And but I am from a family that has found great value in family and family support each other. And glad to be in social work. I transitioned to social work after coming to New Jersey. And I suppose we might get into that a little bit more later. But I am really, really happy and proud to be celebrating 22 years of being at Rutgers School of Social Work and serving along with colleagues and serving students and families and communities that they serve. So I think that's enough about me for the beginning.
Well, excellent. I mean, that's an interesting background and interesting journey. And so I'm quite sure along that journey, you have noted some pressing issues about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what do you believe are some of the most pressing diversity, equity, and inclusion issues right now? And
wow.
What is the starting point for addressing some of those issues?
That's a very good question. Great question, in fact. So I think that the way I frame it is I look at, just as you described it, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that what's really important just in that that listing of terms is equity. And because whatever the particular issue is, we really need to be about equity and liberation, and in our own work through the IIDEA Committee into libertarian consciousness. So there are obviously so many different issues along the continuum of isms, whether it's racism, sexism, people who have issues around inclusion of gender, identity, sexual orientation, people of various levels of ability. I think the driving theme through all of that is really the issue of equity. Yeah, that's what I think.
And what do you think is the starting point for addressing equity?
Right. Thank you again for the question. And I'm going to really place a lot of my thinking has been strengthened by our use of the libertarian consciousness framework. So the starting place for me would be people really becoming aware, taking notice of what's happening within their individual selves, how they identify, and their views, their biases that they have. That's it's a real honest self awareness. But then looking not just within, but looking around and becoming aware of the biases and the prejudice that results in discrimination, across the spectrum, and really being honest about what they see, because we are socialized and in some ways caused not to see, what's really there. And so looking within, looking around, and then looking beyond, not just at what what is, but the potential of how things can be so much better. I think awareness is really and truly the starting place.
So you had mentioned the importance of being honest. And
Yes.
so in conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, one prevailing theme that I noticed you've talked about in the past is what's called honest assessments.
Yes.
What do you think are some things that may prevent communicating an honest assessment about one's social environment?
Wow, excellent. These questions, these are great questions. So what I think what prevents, honest assessments is, well, in the simplest language I know, is being dishonest and having our blinders on. I can give you what I believe might be an example of this. If we roll back 9 years ago or so, I think it was 2014 when Michael Brown was murdered, August, I believe August the 9th of that year. And our school came together, as we often do, great credit to the School of Social Work, to have conversations, support for students, and conversations about acknowledging what took place, honestly acknowledging what took place, and being providing a space where people could express their concerns, their rage, and to think about what can we do to create a more just future. And in that space, I remember a student standing up and, in my opinion, seeking to redirect the energy in the room. There was a packed out audience, but to redirect the energy in the room to talk about trying to see things through the lens and the eye of the police officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. And I thought that even if it was well-intentioned, that it was denying the reason for coming together. We were not coming together to just see things through that particular lens, or even to see things through that particular lens, but to talk about what really took place in an honest way, to tell the truth. And the truth of what took place was that an innocent 18-year-old recent high school graduate was shot and killed, and his body was left for hours in the hot August sun, the way that in our history, Black men, women, and children were lynched and allowed to hang from trees. And so to be able to see that connection with the history of oppression is an honest assessment to try to redirect that, to look at things through the eyes of the oppressor, the perpetrator, I think is dishonest. So that's like an explanation of how I see that being applied.
So, Dr. Battle, you have an extensive background in religion, theology, and divinity, and you've also pastored a church. How do these experiences impact your work in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Great. Thank you. So the way I look at it is that from the history of social work, most of us realize that before there was a profession of social work, most of the social relief that individuals and families needed came through their family systems, their extended family systems, the larger community, and really and truly houses of worship. And so in my own work in the church in particular, I'll speak about in New Jersey, we had in the area of about 34 affinity programs, ministries, outreach efforts in the community. we were doing things. I just give you an example. We had an outreach program to people who were homeless or unhoused, and we had a feeding program for people who were, experiencing, food insecurity. And we provided clothing. And this was not just done, at the seasons, holiday seasons and whatnot. This was done, on a regular basis. We had an outreach program to people who were faced with, back then, HIV/AIDS. And we were very intentional about accepting people and providing connections for resources. The list goes on and on and on. After school program, a summer camp program. We started a community development program, all these things. And what I realized at some point, Thomas, was that I was doing social work, but had never been trained to do social work. And so that was when I came to Rutgers, got accepted into the MSW program, and learned a lot about the ways in which we can engage in policy practice, management, macro practice, and also, of course, more frontline direct practice. And so I was doing it, but I needed to develop the toolkit and the skill set to be more effective. And so that's how I became involved in doing social work, and then was asked to join the faculty for Rutgers School of Social Work. I did so, and was primarily teaching classes while maintaining the other work that I was doing. And then at some point that shifted, and I became full-time in the university setting and engaged in social work. My focus was on administration, policy, and planning. That was the macro track that we had back then. Now it's management and policy. That was my focus at the MSW level. And then when I pressed on into the PhD program at Rutgers, the intersection of religion, spirituality, social work became even more apparent, because my research was looking at the effects of religion and spirituality on depression or depressed mood for people who are seriously ill or bereaved. And the shorter version of that is, does religion matter? Is really what it was about. And the results of the data analysis was that religion matters the most for those who need it the most. It matters for everyone, but there was statistical significance for people, Black people, people of color who were either seriously ill or bereaved. It really helped to mitigate the effects of depression. And so that's been my journey of trying to connect the two. There's lots more, related to that, and be delighted to talk, more about that. But one of the things that I should mention is that I was asked to help to create a course entitled Spirituality and Social Work, so that we would be able to more effectively help students to think about their own spirituality, as well as finding value in the spirituality and religious practices, again, of the clients and families that we would serve. And that was before our accrediting body required all schools of social work to engage in instruction and practice opportunities for students to develop spiritual competency. Yeah.
Great. And so you've conducted quite a few presentations on racism and racial bias. And you're also educated and trained in theology and divinity. Do you think of racism as a spiritual issue?
Good question. So racism is so complicated. When I talk about the work that I do in the church, I'm clearly aware of the history of racism in religion, in religious practices, in many really horrible things have been done. History of the church that has promoted racism and oppression, and that really disturbs me and it disappoints me. And it's been done by all religions, not just any to call out any particular religious practice. And so that's disturbing. So racism is multifaceted. Certainly it has mental aspects to it. I really think that in some ways we are mentally unwell when we allow ourselves to take on the racist ideas that result in racist actions. So I think that the beliefs get transferred into behaviors, and racist beliefs have a mental component to them, have a spiritual component to them. Out of the practice that I operate of, I'm a Christian, and in the teachings of Jesus Christ, he speaks about loving one's neighbor. And many of the stories in the New Testament relate to the way that different groups, the group that Jesus identified with, he was Jewish, and in many of his stories, he identified people who were non-Jewish and the way that they should relate to each other. And it was a way that would demonstrate, the higher teachings of love and acceptance, the opposite, the total opposite of racism. So I do think that there are, again, mental aspects to racism, spiritual aspects. It gets manifested, obviously, in very horrific physical realities, political realities. But I think I would lean on the side of saying, yes, I think that there is a spiritual, unfortunately, a spiritual aspect to racism and racist behaviors.
So you have a knack for leading difficult conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion in spaces like academia, agency settings, and other professional realms. You're also an expert on liturgics and homiletics, homiletics being the practice of preaching and sermon delivery. Does this help you lead difficult conversations on issues like identity-based bias?
Wow, man, these questions are jewels. Yes, some of the people that I have seen and have admired, their readings, their writings, the work that they've done. People like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or Bishop Desmond Tutu. These are individuals who were very much involved in their faith and the practice of their faith, and they engaged people in really important conversations. Everyone's familiar with Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and it's known that much of that speech was extemporaneous, that he had his prepared notes, but at a point in speaking, August 28th, 1963, I think it was, he just spoke out of his his oratorical gifts, as it were, as being a minister, a pastor, a preacher, now social reformer, civil rights leader. He spoke out of that, and he spoke about as a visionary being able to see something that would allow this great nation to realize her greatest, ideals, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and in the language that we use today, intersectionality, inclusion, diversity, equity, and advancement. He was trying to help us, to find some fulfillment of the American dream. Bishop Tutu talks about, I think in his book, Hope and Suffering, about God allowing us to be co-creators with him, as though we were able to help to create a better, a more just, society, a more just future for his people suffering, under oppression, under apartheid in South Africa, but also people globally, around the world. So I do think that my work, in the church has helped me to care, more about the people than just the conversation, which enables an honest conversation. There are examples I have of how that has taken place over the years. This may amuse you. I was looking one day for images, Thomas, that relate to social justice, and scanning through images that came up. There was an image that came up of, it was a side profile of myself. And I was in a classroom setting with a group of middle schoolers, as I remember it. And I stared at that image for a long time, trying to remember, first of all, to make sure I thought it was really, yours truly, but also to remember the context of that. And as it occurs to me, the context was a very unfortunate experience in the community, where there was someone who killed some people, caused the end of life, and the schools, public schools within the community, were trying to help the students through that experience. So they were calling for social workers, counselors, others to volunteer to come into the schools and help in those conversations. And I remember being with these middle schoolers and talking about violence in the community. And something that struck me that day that I've always remembered, I probably will never forget it, is that there was, being young people, some of them were less attentive than others. And there was this one young student who seemed to be more interested in kidding around with his, some of the members of his cohort, classmates that were there, than, paying attention. But he raised his hand. He raised his hand because I asked them, about why do you suppose that there's so much violence in society? And so this young man raised his hand, and I had no idea, what he was going to say. But he spoke up and said that violence is a form of communication. And it really caused me to think of them. I thanked him for his answer. And we started to talk about the fact that if people have good communication skills, like actively listening to people and allowing others to speak, and then sharing your honest thoughts and opinions, then it can be a way of de-escalating very tense situations. But when people lack those communication skills, that sometimes it can escalate very quickly, and the result of which is allowing violence to be their only form or default form of communication, which I thought was just brilliant that this student shared that. So being able to be in that space, have that difficult conversation has emerged from my, part of who I am, my experiences of trying to listen actively to people. If you permit me one more example, I was in a conversation with a rabbi in our community when there was someone who was invited into the community to speak, and there were concerns about whether or not this person was anti-Semitic. And as a result, we ended up for several years, the rabbi and I, bringing our congregations together so that we could learn more about each other's communities, our faith practices, our concerns, and just life, the way that we view and see life. And we were able to bring in a number of different speakers. We had social activities together on a regular basis, and we did this for years. And two of the speakers that we brought in, as I remember, one was James McBride. And James McBride is the author of a number of books, some of which have actually become movies, several of them I know. But his first book was entitled The Color of Water. James McBride's mother is Jewish, white, Jewish. His father, Black clergyman and a minister. And so he was like the right person for our discussions. And he came and spoke about that book, The Color of Water. And interestingly, the title came from an answer to a question he raised for his mother. He asked his mother, what color is God? The response of his mother, the color of water. What a great answer. Great question too, incidentally. But she gave a great answer, and he came and spoke to us about that and allowed us to have our own conversations, which was really, really beautiful. And then one of the other speakers that came to join us was Cornel West. And he came and had a great conversation with us, members of our congregations. I think we may have even opened it up to members of the community to come and to talk. So that's a way of using, skills that we have in our congregations, our faith, that will help us to engage in these really difficult, challenging conversations.
Well, considering difficult, challenging conversations, are there any specific communication tactics that you think work best for an audience's understanding of sensitive issues?
Yeah, good question. I should say that, this work is really risky. And so building a sense of trust and respect for people who are engaged in the conversation, not having hidden agendas. It's almost like I say to people, you can't have other people being open and honest, and you get your hands under the table. You are holding all your cards close to yourself. So it's different from active listening. It's allowing others to be vulnerable and not engaging, in the conversation. It takes more time for some than others, but creating spaces and being intentional about creating spaces so everyone can, find their voices. In larger settings, when trying to hold these conversations, I will try to create brief exercises where people can talk, one-on-one, or, three people together, because it's many people feel more comfortable in those spaces. They may not raise their hands to speak out loud when there are, a lot of people in the conversation. So finding a way to intentionally draw people in, and not being so charged when people say things that you might disagree with. Allow them to say it and think about it, and then even allow yourself the possibility of hearing things differently and thinking about them differently. When I do this in agencies, I think about one agency that I worked with for several, over the course of a couple of weeks, and, meeting with groups of 30 people, a couple of times a day for a couple of weeks. So, after meeting with the first several groups, they were telling other people what they could expect. And so I had to be creative and being able to mix it up some to so they did not assume that they knew exactly where I was going with it. And at the end of the training, the person who invited me thanked me for the training, and speaking about the evaluations, she said they either love you or they hate you. And I said, sounds like my family. And given, a particular day of the week or a particular, experience, I take it, I don't internalize the fact that some people may not be as open to, the conversation, and the fact that sometimes I actually may do better than at other times, but always trying to keep in front of me the concern for people. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, about having honest conversations, allowing oneself to be vulnerable in those spaces, practicing, active listening again, and then just pausing, hit the pause button sometimes, and just think about what somebody has said, rather than having my first, emotional response. Just think about it. So I encourage people sometimes, just think about it. Just sit with it, and then maybe even sometimes having people to write out their thoughts. Doing a little intentional journaling. It's amazing when people practice reflection, that their perspective can be enlarged or in some ways altered, and new growth can take place.
So you talked about leading trainings as well as leading conversations about sensitive issues. Could you tell us a little bit about your diversity and oppression course?
Yes, love to. So the diversity and oppression course is, for those who may be listening to this, it's a part of the required curriculum for all schools of social work. In our particular case, we require the diversity and oppression course of all undergraduate social work majors, as well as all MSW students. It's one of the first classes that our MSW students take, and it's one of the required classes in the undergraduate program that's a part of the foundation year of the MSW program. So that course is really, it's 14, 15 modules, depending upon the student status as an undergraduate or graduate student. And it really begins with a series of learnings aimed at getting the student, again, to look within. So to understand one's individual personal bias, or where the student finds themselves on the continuum of privilege and oppression. The notion of which is that all of us have some form of privilege, and all of us experience some form of oppression. So being able to see that, and we talk about in the early modules about cultural humility, about human rights, things like that. And one of the early assignments for that class is an assignment where students, they are able to watch a PBS special or read a book that's entitled Slavery by Another Name. The goal of that assignment is to get students to think about what they have learned about the history of slavery in this country over against the truth about what really took place. And that assignment is it's an assignment that causes reflection. Students watch the video and or read the book, and they also respond to several questions. We give them 10 questions. I think they respond to 4 or so of the questions, just responding to the questions, talking about hidden histories as an example, and why it's important to talk about things that have been hidden from us, the way that people try to whitewash or reconstruct historical accuracy. And so we progress from that to getting students to do a personal background paper. The personal background paper is where students interview an older family member and gain more understanding about their own personal background. Again, on the privilege of oppression and privilege. And that's really, really an assignment where students come back and say, I learned so many things about my family that I didn't know about. Or I do certain things, not understanding why I do certain things or believe in certain ways, but it's what's been passed on to me from my family. Going back to something that we spoke about earlier, Thomas, with respect to racism, whether racism, is spiritual. Racism is something that is that's historical, and so it's part of the family history that is passed on, so that people who have certain beliefs and have certain behaviors come to discover that those are things that were passed on through the family, as well as notions about privilege and oppression. The course continues with students engaging in their group or class presentations around a series of different topics. There are 5 topics. And this is where students actually read articles, create a case study about populations that we would be working with, and then being able to lead a discussion, with the class, whether it's in person or online. The students are leading the discussion. The final 2 assignments are, one is an interview literature review paper, which I really like this assignment because students are asked to identify someone who's of a different race and another intersection of difference. So someone who may, along the continuum of different ways that we identify, someone who's of a different gender, someone who's of a different sexual orientation, someone who's of a different level of how they identify their ability, their religion, their faith, a whole list of things. So students identify someone that they want to interview. Could be, a coworker, classmate, someone in the community, someone at the gym, someone that they've met along the way. And an interesting part of that assignment is that students are encouraged to engage in a social activity with that person where that person is in the majority. So if you are, interviewing someone who is a Muslim, that you might go to, masjid, or if they're Jewish, be invited to the temple, or if they are of a different sexual orientation, you might end up going to a gay bar or to, a cultural event that represents a different population. And you're in the minority in that space, so you have to demonstrate cultural humility, be put in a space of perhaps some disorientation or discomfort, and then you interview the person. You look at a couple of articles, several articles, I think five or more, five or so, at least five, that relate to that person's identity, and you then integrate it. You talk about what resonates with the person's experience, what's different, and how it applies to social work. And then quickly, the last one is the assignment where students have to engage in an activity that promotes social, racial, economic, or environmental justice. So this is taking it up another level. So it's not just about knowledge. We want to impact your knowledge, your values, and your skills. So engage in an activity that you create or that you participate in that helps to promote, a more just future. So that's the course, in terms of how it's described, and I think it's a great course. It's interesting. It constantly evolves, so that we are looking at racial justice, social justice as an umbrella, but racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, political justice, a range of topics. Does that kind of explain it?
Oh, absolutely. No,
great. Thank you.
No, excellent explanation. Very thorough, and good to know that there is some application, or a good bit of application involved in that.
Right. Thank you.
And so you have developed and published a diversity and oppression scale.
Mm-hmm.
How can organizations use this scale to tackle their issues regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, great. So years ago, Dr. Lily Windsor, who was at Rutgers, and another colleague that she knew from the University of Texas at Austin, and myself, we worked together to evaluate students' learnings. It really relates to what we're just talking about, to the diversity and oppression course, to really see if there's some change in students learning in that course. And so I think what's important is for organizations to find a way, whether it's what we refer to as the DOS scale, the diversity and oppression scale, some way to measure their success in creating diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some metrics, some way of getting feedback to see where their efforts are working, where their efforts are not working, and ways that they can improve those efforts. So it might not just be using our scale, which was intended for students, but finding a way to quantify and qualify, looking at quantitative and qualitative analysis of their best efforts to see if they are working. There's a lot of research out there that suggests that what we do in a lot of the DEI work is a little more than window dressing. So it goes back to our first question, the real evidence for me is whether or not there is equity, and being able to determine that in measurable ways.
Well, that's important because, it's difficult to manage what you can't measure.
If you can't measure, how are you going to manage it? Exactly.
And so why is it important to challenge anti-Black racism in social work curriculum?
Wow. Yes. Again, the questions are important. So, part of the work that I've been involved in now for 15 years in an organized way is through the National Association of Social Work and the New Jersey chapter. And in the work that I became involved in, and a shout out to Bill Waltman, who was the president at that time, a president of NASWNJ, and a member of our faculty. He asked me to become involved in the efforts of NASWNJ around responding to institutional racism. That work actually, at the state level, the region level, was initiated at the national level. The president at that time of NASW National, Betsy Clark, she, along with other social work organizations, issued a call to action. And the call to action was for social workers to address institutional racism within social work organizations. And so I became involved in that work. And I want to say, not even parenthetically, because I think it's important, but as a result of getting involved, I became the first Black president of NASWNJ. And that's important to me because it has little to do with, with me as an individual, but a lot to do with the fact that in a state as diverse as New Jersey, that it took that long for us to to be able to recognize leadership out of the Black and Brown communities in a very important and significant way. And so I became involved in that work around institutional racism. We partnered with Rutgers University and created a leadership certificate program that was entitled, it had to do with institutionalizing diversity. And it was like leadership through a new lens, and diversity being the lens. Now, fast forward from that experience, we were still going through the things that I referenced about Michael Brown, certainly others from that period forward, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor. In this particular area, Eric Gardner, and of course, on a much more well-known scale, what took place on March 25th in 2020, the nation was galvanized around the death of George Floyd, and not just his death, but his murder, his public murder. And efforts were realized around the need to engage in anti-racism. And this was largely, Ibram Kendi got a lot of attention for the work that he was doing. He was not the first person to identify anti-racism, and others who were involved in the work before him were doing it, even if they were not calling it anti-racism. It was work that was designed to bring an end to to racism, so taking a stand. And so during the time, around that time, at our school, I chaired the undergraduate curriculum committee. Our curriculum committee had been discussing a way to distinguish our school and our work from the other great schools of social work in the state and beyond, in particular at the undergraduate level. And we discussed any number of different frameworks that we might choose, and we chose an anti-racist framework as the core of our efforts. So it was embedded in our curriculum, embedded in our goals, our course goals, program goals, et cetera. And I joined with the effort, or I led the effort actually, of creating a course confronting anti-Black racism. And one of our recent, PhD students, Alicia Mendez, she provided a lot of work and support, as did other colleagues. in that effort. And that course has now been taught for the last couple of years. And the focus of the course is, again, on not just understanding, but really taking action. So students who take the course, it's an elective. There are many of them are non-social work students who choose to take this course. Some of them actually end up coming into the major as a result of the course, but they go through a series of modules, discussions, activities, assignments, that the goal of which is to confront anti-Black racism. And the reason for the focus specifically on anti-Black racism is because the reality in this country is that racism has a history of being manifested at an institutional level against Black and brown citizens, but African women, men, children who were brought to this country and made slaves. And that's what the course identifies, and students are able to learn more about and take action against.
Great.
I'm sorry, and I should, if I can, I should just add to the fact that, again, because I think Rutgers is like at the leading edge of a lot of things that are happening. We were doing that before our accrediting body, the Council on Social Work Education, instituted in less than a year ago, last summer, through part of the discussion, the requirement for all schools of social work to engage in not just diversity, equity, inclusion, but ADEI, anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, that's going to be the educational policy accreditation standard for all schools of social work. And we were at the vanguard of that, as well as the fact that in July of 2020, the 12 grand challenges of social work, a 10-year plan for the social work profession to respond to grand challenges. During that summer of the murder of George Floyd, the death of Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, sadly, there was another grand challenge that was added, which is the challenge to eliminate racism. And so I think that's why anti-racism and anti-Black racism is so important to schools of social work, the profession of social work, and to becoming a more just future in this nation and beyond.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Battle. From you, we certainly get a holistic insight and perspective on both the training and academic and professional aspects of not only social work, but diversity, inclusion, and equity. So thank you again. We do very much so appreciate you sharing your time and journey with us, as well as you serving in the many capacities that you do at Rutgers School of Social Work. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be with you.